Hello and welcome to Abe's Complete Star Trek podcast, where I discuss all Star Trek episodes from the original series on through the movies, and then TNG, DS9, and the other series that have happened since. And where today I'll be discussing the 15th episode of the first season of the original series, Balance of Terror. Now, As far as the Netflix description of this episode is concerned, after Romulan warbirds destroy Federation outposts, the Enterprise pursues them. Similarities between them and the Vulcans spark bigotry against Spock. Now, this is a little bit inaccurate because it's only one ship that's kind of shown in this episode. And it's an episode which I have been looking forward to doing a podcast on for a while, for several reasons. One, it introduces the Romulans as a nemesis to the Federation, and it also introduces Mark Leonard as a recurring actor on the series. He notably, as far as this episode is concerned, plays the Romulan commander, but most notably, as far as the Star Trek series, generally speaking, is concerned, ends up playing Sarek, or Spock's father. So the episode begins kind of like a Dickens novel in terms of, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Best of times being that, there's a ceremony of sorts being set up in the chapel, and Kirk gets a call from the bridge to say that, 2 Federation outposts have gone silent, and Kirk gives the order to proceed on to the next one. And we find out that the ceremony that's being prepared for is a wedding. The ceremonies commence, and it's all going really well, really lovely. Kirk's giving a bit of a standard but nice opening spiel that, one of the most pleasant duties of a ship captain since the days of the first ruling ships was to, bind people in matrimony. And just as the ceremony is getting underway, the ship gets called to red alert because the next outpost, Outpost 4, is under attack. Unfortunately, they're unable to proceed with the ceremony, and everyone's going about the hustle and bustle of, going to their alert stations. We get to the opening titles at that point, and after that, we get sent to the bridge, where Kirk is coming, and basically the same information is being relayed that the outpost, that Outpost 4 is under attack, but there's no information on the attacker. And here's where we get, next we get a fair amount of exposition, just so that we as an audience, but also as far as the Enterprise crew is concerned, get some background to what's about to happen. So we get displayed on the screen, screenshot of sorts of this area of space, and shown the neutral zone between the Federation and the Romulan Empire, and that along this neutral zone there's a series of outposts which are being built onto asteroids, which are very dense. I mean, they're not certainly not going to be easily destroyed. And we find out that there was a Earth-Romulan war about a century ago, before there was visual communication, before there was any way to transport from one ship to another, and a lot of the technologies that were in existence at the original series point in time, didn't exist, and the weapons were kind of primitive atomic weapons, and so it was very basic kind of Big Bang type technology, but still. And so as a result, because of this, and because the treaty, there was a treaty set up which established the neutral zone, was done entirely over audio radio. There was no actual visual communication, so it was entirely, yes, we agree, we'll stay on this side of the line. Yes, we agree, you'll stay on that side of the line, and the line will be this wide, and never shall the twain meet. Essentially, and that's the nature of the neutral zone treaty. Kirk then gives a rather interesting kind of although understandable to a point. I mean, I don't necessarily want to start another war. I mean, the Federation in and of itself is not a warlike organization, but it is, and it's the way I picture the Federation is kind of like the Jedi of sorts from Star Wars. I mean, they're capable of fighting, but their main, when necessary, but their main goal is to keep the peace. Just as, Jedis are, just in a more just on a larger scale in some respects, I suppose, because there's only a limited number of Jedi, whereas the Federation is, well, huge by comparison. So you've got, you got Kirk jumping in at this point and saying that regardless of what the Romulans do, so no provocation or anything will count as sufficient reason to violate the zone. Something which I do agree with to a point, because again, the Federation's not warlike. There is the propaganda that has been given of both sides. So you've got the Federation thinking that the Romulans are warlike, and only the Romulans know what they think of us. As Spock makes a comment on as well, and which is a fair point. But in war, you've got propaganda machines who are constantly saying hate the enemy, hate the enemy, hate the enemy, regardless of which side you're on. And it takes a while for those in any war kind of situation to change from propaganda of hate to propaganda of peace. And personally, it's a shame that we never really do get into that. Even with the later series, Enterprise, it's something which they never really explore. But it would have been, that would have been an interesting kind of thing to get into, to find out what actually happened with the Earth-Romulan War, all that long ago, and how it was started, and even more so how it was ended. How did they agree to, shall we say, the ceasefire? But and I'm sure there are books or novels on the subject, but they're ones that A, I haven't read, and B, I'm not going to be referencing any books or novels in this podcast because they are, in a lot of ways, a world unto themselves. But yes, I'm going to keep watching and let's see where things kind of go from here. So the lieutenant who's at Con, Mr. Stiles, is making the comment that even though there's been no official report of this, we know who the attacker is. And Kirk is like, well, how would you know what a Romulan bird of prey, what a Romulan ship looks like? I doubt they're going to kind of radio and identify themselves. When you find out that, and he says, you'll know them, so they're painted like a giant bird of prey. I got to admit, when we see it, the design of the Romulan ship is rather awesome. I love it. Very good for late 60s kind of design. I'm very impressed. We'll get to see it in just a few minutes. But he said, but Kirk is surprised that he actually knows this much, and Stiles is like, well, there was several crewmen and officers in the original Earth-Romulan War, who were all killed by the Romulans, and Kirk reminds them that was their war, not yours. Just remember, to chill, essentially, which is all too fair enough. And so the Enterprise starts approaching, the first two outposts that went silent, and much to everyone's shock, both they were completely destroyed, and so at this point, because we don't know specifically what's going on, and we at least know that that they are under attack, but we don't know the full details. But they are obviously going to be going into a battle situation. Kirk correctly calls for battle stations. I love the way Sulu says it, but yeah. Anyway, and so everyone's getting to their is now getting to their battle stations, and we now cut down to the phaser control room, where the two people who are going to get married at the beginning of the episode are kind of talking, and he's kind of giving her a bit of a talking to. You need to kind of get to it so that you're so that all the systems kind of get up and ready, quickly, because we don't know when we're going to be attacked and what we're going to need to do, but still. So let's find out how Outpost 4 is faring. So Kirk manages, or the Enterprise manages to make contact with Outpost 4, and it is severely damaged. It's, Kirk's trying to get information on who attacked, but the station commander, has no idea. It was an unmarked ship that was, attacked with essentially just one shot with a high energy plasma weapon, even with the outpost shields on full, did a rather significant amount of damage, almost taking out the outpost in one shot. Just after that, and it's also mentioned that the ship disappears. So this is where we also get our first look at a cloaking device. Not that it gets called out at this point, just that the ship was somehow able to vanish after firing. And then not too long after that comment, we get our first look at the ship. And as mentioned before, I love the design. I got to admit, after that, upon seeing it, and because on Netflix they've got the remastered version, so not the original 60s kind of graphics, but kind of souped up 60s graphics, if you will, a little bit, for this. So it does look a little better and a little more, I don't know, I wouldn't go with realistic, but it does look a little better, a little more, not quite so computer well, I don't know, I'm kind of saying it badly, but you get the idea, I'm hoping. And then the fires off the weapon and takes out the outpost. As I said, so the ship then disappears. Disappears once again after firing the shot, and the Enterprise was out of range to do anything at that point. Kirk tried to say, look, pick me, shoot at me, but that didn't have much of a. So, because the Romulans haven't responded to any hails or any kind of communications at this point, preferring to, just attack and run, which seems to be typical kind of Romulan behavior. Something which we'll deal with as the series, as the several series kind of continue or develop. So let's see what the Enterprise, what Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise do next. So after the Romulan ship disappears or cloaks again, Uhura's continuing to try and to communicate with them, but Kirk says don't bother, just stop doing it. And Spock is making some observations, and certainly reasonable ones, about the nature of the Romulan cloaking device. That invisibility was theoretically possible, that if they were able to bend light around the ship, but the power cost would be enormous, which would explain why they have to decloak in order to fire. Because a ship can only generate so much power, and they can only afford to do one thing at a time, either shoot or cloak, but not both. Which is a weakness, to a point, but given how powerful the weapon is, an understandable and affordable one, given the fact it was able to destroy the outpost and destroy 3 outposts with only 2 shots each, would be my guess. So Spock is understandably amazed, but in his own Vulcan-like way at that. There is a sensor blip, not one that can be seen on the screen, but I would say energy related. That there must be some kind of some form of energy which is bleeding through the cloaking device, so that it can still be detected on sensors, and allows the ship to to still be tracked. So Spock says that the direction it's taking is is headed home, and Kirk is about to break his own earlier order, which I'm about to find very interesting, and I'm just going to keep watching this bit to see if he provides an explanation as to why. So Kirk, the way that Kirk changes his order or breaks his order indirectly at this point, he doesn't actually say to cross the zone, but he orders Sulu and the con officer, Mr. Styles, to not have an intercept course, not try and catch up to them, but to mirror them, so that whatever the Romulan ship does, they do, so that the Romulans think that it's a reflection, an echo, a sensor echo, and that they don't realize that they're actually being pursued or followed. Styles doesn't quite understand the reasons for this, and quite frankly, neither do I, because just after giving the order, Styles makes some relevant makes some relevant points, but a bad conclusion, being that the Romulans have crossed the border, destroyed our outposts, killed our men. And personally, I would agree if Styles at that point had said that yes, they do need to be followed, they do they do need to be hunted down and eliminated, I would agree. But as far as just mirroring them to watch what they do, I don't know. The fact they've destroyed at least 3 outposts, and are now running to head home to tell the High Command how weak the Federation is, essentially, and you're just wanting to follow them there. I find that to be, not good in a lot of different ways. But the bad conclusion that Styles makes is that there may be Romulan spies on board the ship. The reason why I say that's a bad conclusion is because if there were Romulan spies on board the ship, they would know about the Enterprise. Not to mention the fact that when the last Outpost 4, was being attacked and destroyed, that the Enterprise was sending challenges, pick on someone your own size, pick us, kind of sending those kind of hailing messages. And I would find it extremely odd that the Romulans didn't detect him. But Kirk, he does a smart thing. I mean, it's better be safe rather than sorry, so he does order a security alert so that the guards can be, can just be stationed around the ship, just keep an eye out. But personally, I think that that's a little out there at this point. Now we're getting to to another interesting thing. So Uhura has managed to lock onto a communication signal that's being sent from the Romulan ship, and Spock is able to use that transmission to get a look at the bridge, and we see Mark Leonard as the Romulan commander turn around, look at the camera, and see that Romulans and Vulcans look virtually identical. Now, the thing that I'm finding interesting here is that the way Spock's expression right at that point, initially there's a little bit of surprise, but then there's an "I told you so" kind of look. It's like, oh yeah, light bulb moment maybe for him. Which I do find odd, because I'm kind of debating whether or not to go into future knowledge about past knowledge. I'll kind of go. I guess I'll give a bit of a spoiler alert warning, I suppose, for the information I'm about to say, and for those who don't want to, who are unfamiliar, feel free to skip for about the next minute, I suppose. But Romulans and Vulcans do share a heritage. They did live on Vulcan roughly about 1,000 years ago, and then 1,000 years ago there was a split between those who wanted to follow logic and those who wanted to follow emotion. Logic remained Vulcans. Emotion became Romulans and left to go to Romulus. And it's shown in later episodes of both the original series and other episodes that come up that this history is known. That they are aware that there was a group of Vulcans who left the homeworld a millennia ago, and I can understand them not knowing what happened, but I suppose I can understand the Vulcans not knowing what happened to them back then. I mean, they left and they haven't had any communications from them since, or heard anything from them since. And so I suppose I can understand, but what I suppose the light bulb moment, and this is me kind of thinking aloud, so kind of going on this thought journey with me. It does make sense then that this would be a light bulb moment for Spock, for him to know, to realize, oh, so that's what happened to my forebears. But yeah, Styles is obviously kind of shaken by this. But let's see how he and the crew kind of react to what they've just seen. So Styles isn't taking it well, and he's kind of got a bit of a thing with Spock now. But Kirk tells him to leave any bigotry in his quarters. There's no place for it on the bridge, which I fully agree with. And Spock then tries to decode the message from which the Romulans sent, and then we get our first look at the Romulans as characters, and the crew, the Romulan crew, the ship is decloaked, and because they think that there's no enemy to concern us, we're far enough away. The cloaking device consumes a lot of power. Let's try and save some, but the commander's thinking, well, the reflection, what you think is the reflection, I actually think is an Earth ship. I think we are, I'm fairly sure we're being followed, and being the commander, it's my judgment that prevails. Which is all too fair enough. After, so they, cloaking device gets put back on, and the commander's talking, then talks to his first officer, who's saying, if it's an Earth ship that's following us, why do they not attack? And quite frankly, I'll be asking a very similar question. Why wouldn't they attack? I mean, but the commander does give. We don't actually get a name for him in the episode, so he's forever going to be the Romulan commander. But he does give a very fair point. First, study the enemy, learn what you can about him, which does make sense. I mean, seek weakness, but it also helps. The more information that you have on a potential enemy, and the Romulans do, form do end up forming a rather large recurring enemy of sorts, that a continuous threat to the Federation, and so it does make sense that Kirk would be wanting to learn everything he can about them before blowing them up. I mean, you can't get any information from a corpse. Unless you're a mortician like Ducky from NCIS, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish. And so and then the commander calls for the officer who sent that communication, and essentially calls him an idiot. Because he broke the rule of silence, which I do fully agree with. If you're trying to run silent, you run silent. No communications, no transmissions of any kind, because even in this day and age, and if you go back to the 60s, granted the technology was still in its infancy back then, but phone lines could be tracked. And so similar thing, that subspace communications can be tracked. Which is why when you're trying to move stealthily, you don't yell and raise your fingers and say, "Here's me! Here's me!" which is essentially what that officer did, and so the commander quite rightly demotes him. And sends him back to work. So the commander is then having a bit of a talk, or one-on-one, if you will, with his first officer, and he does raise, this is a very interesting conversation in some respects. The initial start of it is a warning by the first officer that the guy who just demoted has got friends who have got powerful friends that could be in danger for you. So that is kind of leading to the description that the Romulans are a treacherous people, deceitful and always kind of out for their own. So trust is a very hard thing to earn in that kind of environment. Additionally, kind of the next part to the conversation is that what do we do now? It's kind of a what do we do now kind of conversation, and the commander, the first officer is kind of saying, the commander is actually saying that there's going to be proof of the Earthman's weakness, because we've got the outposts which have been destroyed, and we've got the Earth vessel who is following, and when he attacks, we'll destroy him, which will also prove, also be an additional proof of the Earthman's weakness, and that a gift to the homeland, another war. And the first officer saying, well, why not? I mean, if we are strong, why not wipe out the weak? Which is really I love that, the two kind of lines of thought in, which are displayed at the end of the First Night movie of First Night with, Sean Connery and Richard Gere. It's the two schools of thought between Malagant and King Arthur is that Malagant is like, God made me strong so I can live my life, so that the strong rule the weak. That's how your God made the world. To which King Arthur replies, God makes us strong only for a while, so that we can help each other. And it's true, in a lot of ways. As far as King Arthur's, both lines of thinking do have merit, but I prefer King Arthur's line of thinking because we are here to, here to help each other. We are here to, use our, make it weak things strong. So to help use our strengths to help another person's weakness, so that we can, all live good and productive lives. In one way or another. I mean, architects are out there to help build buildings to allow other people to kind of work and do, various things. Customer service people are there to help people understand different, to allow people to purchase items or to provide advice and information, which others not trained in that kind of knowledge would otherwise be unable to provide. And I could go on, but you get the idea. Back to the episode, though. The commander's like, do we have to do this? Do we have to have another war? We've lost so many people in previous wars. Must we start another one? So you can tell this commander's been around for a while, has led his own fair share of campaigns, but it's starting to get to that point in life where he's, okay, enough. Do we have to start another war? I don't want to lose any more of my friends, and it wouldn't half surprise me if the first officer was on that list. I don't want to lose you. So at the end of the conversation with the Centurion, the first officer, the commander, saying, there's a part of me that's wishing for destruction, but I know my duty is to return home and to report what we've done. So we get back to the, to the Enterprise at this point, and Sulu's still, kind of mirroring the the Romulans' course, so they still continue to look like a reflection. And Kirk, or the first officer Styles reports to Kirk they're about less than an hour from the neutral zone, and it'll be time to make a decision as to whether or not to pursue or turn back. Scotty then reports that he's beamed aboard some debris from one of the destroyed outposts, and they go down to the to the briefing room, and we have another kind of expeditional session. Now, in this, there are some certainly some valid points here. First of all, the material that Spock's holding is supposed to be the strongest material known to their science, and he manages to crush it with one hand. So the Romulans' plasma weapon is extremely powerful and causes a forced implosion. Just as a brief side note, I've never really known the difference between an implosion and an explosion. I mean, in my mind, they both go boom. Something which I'll probably look up after this, after I'm done with this podcast. But yeah, anyway, someone feel free to make a comment on that if they want. But anyway, they're continuing to talk about their options, and after talking about the the tactical situation, McCoy quite rightly essentially says the situation here is that whatever this vessel does or doesn't do hangs in the millions of lives, and essentially another war hangs in the balance depending on what we do or don't do. And then Styles has his chance to pipe up, and he's been holding this in for a while, you can tell. But he essentially raises the three valid points. They can either fight and win, and because the Romulans are still on the Federation side of the neutral zone, no one would question it, because there would be clear proof that the Romulans broke the treaty, which could lead to another war. They could fight and lose, in which case the Romulans, because it would be either vengeance or you're weak, you suck, we'll beat you because we're big Romulan bullies, or we could turn and run, and the Romulans would go the whole we will kill you because you cannot stand up to our might, in the same kind of situation as if they lost. And then he kind of lets loose on Spock because of the physical similarities between the Romulans and Vulcans. As far as in the original series, they do look practically alike. Styles is wondering, why didn't you tell us about your connection to the Romulans? Which certainly is a very fair question. So Spock's reply to Styles is that he agrees with him that they should attack. And personally, I can certainly understand where Spock is about to come from, because he says that he's remembering a time in Vulcan's history when there was a warlike, savage colonizing period, and he feels that the Romulans were an offshoot of that offshoot of his Vulcan ancestry, that maintained that martial kind of aggressive stance, and makes a comment that if they do still have that philosophy, then weakness is something we dare not show. And McCoy's like, you realize you're gambling millions of lives? And Spock is like, well, I do understand where Spock is coming from, because depending on the person, and in this case, depending on the race, some people only respect you when you meet strength with strength rather than meekness or timidness. There's an episode which I'll talk about more when I get to it, as far as Next Generation, where Wesley is has a brief encounter with, I can't quite remember what the race was, but I know his name was Rondon, and Rondon deliberately bumps into Wesley, starts to have a confrontation, and Wesley has got two options. He can either apologize and try to walk away, or he can, stand up to Rondon and say, and do what he did, and say, you bumped into me. How dare you? Do you want this to become violent? Which I think is very cute from a small Wesley compared to the tank that this guy is. But Rondon respects that strength being shown to him and moves on. And it's a very similar, kind of thing that, that the Romulans have. So Kirk asks, starts to get, some, tactical information. How far away from the neutral zone are they, and what's ahead? They find that, Spock reports there's a comet coming up, and that the Romulans are changing course toward it. And Spock reports that even with the cloaking device on, we'll still be able to see them when they pass through the comet's trail. So Kirk uses this as their chance to attack, and orders the crew to go to battle stations, which I'm sure Stiles is happy about. And so let's see how this encounter. And so the battle begins. So the idea, as far as I'll start with the Romulans' perspective first, and then I'll switch to the Enterprise. So the Romulans' plan is to enter the comet's tail, where the Enterprise's sensors won't be able to track them, and then while they're wondering what the hell's going on, they'll turn around and fire and destroy them. The Enterprise plans to, knows that, with the visible trail that that the Romulan ship will leave when entering the comet's tail, that that they would be able to kind of guess the course through the tail, and they'll meet them at the other end and kind of attack and destroy them on that side. Neither tactic ends up working so well, because as soon as the Enterprise moves out of its mirroring position, I'll call it science officer, for lack of a better term, comments that, finally our sensors are clear. And the Romulan commander realizes what the other ship is trying to do, and orders evasive maneuvers to avoid that from happening, avoid them from being caught at that end. And on the Enterprise, they find when they don't see the Romulan ship where it's supposed to be, Kirk orders just some random phaser fire in the general kind of area where the Romulan ship was supposed to be, to try and find them. They do end up hitting the Romulan ship. It's at this point that you actually find out how weak Federation phasers are, because at this particular level of technology, because the Romulan ship is there's 2 rounds of phaser fire fired at them, and neither one destroys the ship or causes the cloaking device to fail. But it does cause some damage, and there was some pretty heavy falling debris, which ends up which was going to hit the commander, but the Centurion knocked him out of the way and sacrificed his own life for that of his friend. Right then, the not too long after that, the sensors end up not working anymore. They've overloaded. So yeah, good design there. I mean, weak. It's almost kind of defiant, like from DS9. I know I'm jumping ahead, and I'm going to be doing that a lot. I apologize. Kind of spoilers and whatnot for this podcast. But I'm hoping that those who are listening to this would have watched the rest of the series as well, but would be enjoying going through this with me again. Anyway, the Defiant is overpowered and kind of 2 big teeth for too small a mouth, if you will. And it's a similar thing that I'm kind of picturing for the Enterprise here. That but even so, it's going to take a while to repair that damage. The Romulan ship then decloaks and fires off around, which the Enterprise does manage to mostly escape. I mean, they do run away at full warp speed, but the weapon is still able to track them and but it's not quite at full power, so the Enterprise does survive that initial shot. So my next point of interest is that while the weapon does have a limited range, I'm wondering what kind of homing tracking it's got when it's got a target. I mean, and this is one thing which isn't really kind of defined at this particular point, but why didn't Kirk just kind of turn 10 degrees to the left or something? I mean, really? These kinds of weapons usually just fire in a straight line, so just move out of the line of fire. Is it really that hard to to think about? So that one I'm calling a bit of a plot hole. But after they kind of survive the hit, Spock manages to repair the phasers, and they return to mirroring the Romulan vessel. Back on the Romulan ship, we see the Centurion is severely injured, and the crew is reporting that the Earthship is returned, the reflection is returned, and the officer who sent the message, his name was Decius, or at least that's what I'm going to call him, because I think that's what his name was, is surprised because so far everything they've hit with with their weapon has been destroyed, and yet the ship is back. So he's like, "What the?" But the commander's saying we need a cloak. We need to make sure we're not so easily seen. There's a bit of a fuel warning, understandable, because they can only hold a cloak or fire the weapon, and either one does take a tremendous amount of energy to do, either on a short burst or to maintain. But it is a necessity in order to maintain their safety. So the time has come for Kirk to make a decision. Do they violate the zone? Because they're 1 minute away. So do they violate the zone and pursue the ship, or do they let the Romulans go? With a minute left, Kirk just makes a decision to try and take him out before they cross the border. And the crew's like, well, they're quite a way ahead of us. And a phaser shot at this distance, while they're cloaked, is going to be the wildest stroke of luck. But naturally, the shots managed to hit. And there is more damage done to the Romulan ship. Additionally, to that, Kirk makes a call. We'll violate the zone. We've got to take the Romulans out so they can't report our weakness, and so that the Romulans know that we are certainly a force to be reckoned with. Given the fact that it's been a century since the last war, it certainly is understandable that that's the that's the tack that he chooses to take. Now, on the Romulan ship, the Centurion has died, and the crew's wondering, what the hell do we do? And the commander's is about to lay a trap for the Enterprise. He orders all debris into the disposal tubes in the body of the Centurion, because he knows that the Enterprise will want to investigate. A chance to perform an autopsy or examine a Romulan corpse would certainly be be of interest. And further shots continue to take place. The commander does make an interesting observation here that he needs to use all his experience now to be able to get home. So he's beginning to realise that Kirk is a better commander, the Enterprise is a better ship, and that it's going to take a miracle for them to survive what has now, what was supposed to be an easy victory, into what quite likely has become a suicide mission for his crew. So after picking up the debris that the Romulan ship has dropped off, they've lost track of the Romulans, and so they're both going to play possum, both play dead, and wait and see who makes the first move. Initially, 20 minutes go by on the Romulan ship, and Decius is thinking that the Enterprise is left because they're not detecting him, which personally I think goes to show the weakness of Romulan senses, because all they really need to do is look out a window. Additional to that, though, or back on the Enterprise, Spock says that he needs to continue some repairs, which Kirk reminds him to do quietly. And then in the next log entry, we find out that it's essentially been 10 hours that they've been waiting, silently for some sign, and it's essentially been 10 hours, that they've been playing possum, and we now get down to Kirk's quarters, to where Kirk and McCoy are talking, and I love this bit. I mean, Kirk is showing a little bit of doubt. It's been 10 hours, nothing has happened, what if I made the wrong call? And McCoy comes back with a beautiful equation, and I love it, so very much. I mean, occasionally Star Trek pulls out some beautiful lines, and this is certainly one of them. And I'll try and repeat it as closely as to what he did. So, in this galaxy, 3 million Earth-type planets, and in this universe, 3 million galaxies, and all that, just one of us. Don't destroy the one named Kirk. I love that line for so many reasons. There are some religious overtones which I could mention, but I'm going to leave that part alone. But I love it because it's true. There is only one, in this case, one Abe, one of you, dear listener, who's being kind enough to listen to this podcast. One of each and every one of us, and we all have one life to live, one set of choices to make. In this life that make it better or worse, and live it how we will, but we should all endeavor to do our best so that we don't destroy the one named me. And with that thought, Kirk goes to the bridge to continue the waiting game and resume command of the ship in a more active kind of style, I guess. And here is where Spock makes a goof. Because they're running silent, and he just finishes his repairs. He quietly closes up his tricorder, which he's done to make sure which he used just to make sure the repairs are complete and done properly. And he then pushes a button which activates a sensor or something, sends out a light like a flare, essentially, saying, "Here we are." Kirk realizes the problem and immediately orders all sensors to power up and weapons. So when the Romulans think they've got the Enterprise actually has got them, and Decius is thinking, how is this possible? The Praetor's proudest flagship beaten, and the commander's like, well, he's a sorcerer when he can read the thoughts of my brain, essentially, because Sapphire's managed to guess my every move. But then he has one last trick up his sleeve, and I gotta say I'm very disappointed in Kirk with what happens here, because the Romulan commander orders more debris into the tubes, to be vented out into space, and a nuclear weapon, a nuclear warhead, and the Enterprise sensors see it. They see it as a metal-cased object, and Kirk does order the Enterprise to kind of move away, but also orders the phasers to fire point blank, which is the stupidest move that Kirk could have possibly done. I say it's the stupidest thing that he possibly could have done because, yes, let's take this unknown object, which could be a bomb, wait till it is right next to us, turn to the side of the ship so that it blows up the side instead of the front. I mean, really, Kirk? Come on! I expected more, more from you, and because there's no knowing how powerful a weapon would be. He senses that that it's a trap, which is why he, kind of, pardon me, orders evasive maneuvers. But I mean, come on, fire point blank. That's an intelligent move. So the Enterprise is now severely damaged because of the nuke that was just blown up in its face. And personally, I'm disappointed in the Romulan commander at this point, because with the Enterprise being as damaged as it is, perfect time to move into strike. and finish her off. Particularly given all the damage that the Enterprise has kind of dished out, it would be about time for the Romulans to dish some back. So let's see if the Romulan commander actually. So repairs are underway on the Enterprise, and they managed to get some phaser power from the forward phaser room and engine power back up and running. But Kirk orders them to essentially the Enterprise to continue to play dead. Maybe they can get the Romulans to turn around and come back to their side of the neutral zone to try and finish them off, and they could take advantage of that to try and destroy them. On the Romulan ship, Decius is getting impatient, waiting. He's saying, "Look, they're at our mercy. We've got we should destroy them while we've got the chance." The commander's a little more circumspect, I suppose, a little more careful, but he essentially succumbs to the pressure from Decius and says, "We will attack, but on my order," instead of continuing on a course for home. So Spock goes down to the phaser room for another for a personal damage report, and Tomlinson is there with Styles. It's only the two of them in there now, and because all the other crew are either injured or helping with repairs to other parts of the ship. And after Spock leaves, Styles notices that coolant is leaking from the phaser room. Tomlinson goes to start repairing it, but this is a very toxic kind of chemical. Okay, so now just for my final kind of the review of the last 5 minutes, and then final thoughts on the episode. The Romulans decloak in an attempt to get their final shot off to destroy the Enterprise, and Kirk orders phaser fire, but there's no response. Spock, who's just come out of the phaser room, runs back in there, sees that both Tomlinson and Styles have essentially gone unconscious, and manages to kind of wade through the coolant to be able to fire the phasers to the point where the Romulan ship is completely disabled. At this point, there's a communication between Kirk and the Romulan commander, where they essentially acknowledge their mutual respect for each other, and the Romulan commander says there's just one last duty to perform, and he self-destructs his ship to prevent any of their kind of technology falling into Federation hands. And at the end of the episode, we find that there was only that while there were some bumps and bruises and radiation burns, there was only one casualty, and that's Tomlinson, who was the young man at the beginning of the episode who was due to get married. And we see that his fiancée or bride-to-be is in the chapel, kind of praying and taking some comfort from her own kind of religious beliefs. And so ends the episode. So this has actually been a very enjoyable one. I have enjoyed the tactics. There's a part of me here which was kind of remembering a line from The Hunt from Red October, "Combat tactics, Mr. Ryan," where just seeing, but it was also a little bit weak. The fact that the phasers were still hitting a cloaked ship, that from such a distance away, the fact that some basic evasive maneuvers on either or both parts could have made this a more interesting battle rather than just a straight line thing. But I do like the fact that at the end, they do acknowledge their mutual respect for each other and acknowledge that you were a worthy adversary, essentially. I also like the fact that the Romulans do end up playing a major role of sorts in the Star Trek series, and I look forward to kind of commenting on the next time they make an appearance. I'm not quite sure when that is. In fact, that's one thing which I'm enjoying about going through these episodes again, is kind of refamiliarizing myself with the original series. It's something which I've not done for a long time. But yeah, so once again, thank you all for listening. If you do want to kind of comment on my thoughts or kind of note how ridiculous I've been or whatever, correct any information, or just want to provide me some general feedback, I would appreciate it.